Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm super excited to share with you the 2022 Trek Domane AL4. As usual, we're going to look at the specs/features, we're going to find out the weight, we're going to look at the ride quality, and lastly, we're going to answer the question, should you buy this bike? So if you're interested, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let's hop right into it. Alright guys, well let's first talk about what the Domane is. So the Domane is Trek's endurance style road bike. So what that means is it's going to have a super comfortable geometry, and you can kind of see that by looking at the top here where the handlebars are almost as high as the saddle. So what that's going to do is keep you in a pretty upright, comfortable position, and overall it's just a really comfortable geometry, especially if you're someone who's a beginner road biker. Now this is the Domane AL4, and the part number indicates the component spec. So since this is a 4, it's going to ship with Shimano Tiagra stock, but you can go up to the Domane AL5, which ships with the Shimano 105, or all the way down to the Domane AL2, which ships with Shimano Claris. Okay, so let's talk about the frame of this bike. So the frame is Trek's 100 series alpha aluminum, and that's going to be the same type of aluminum that all of their Domane aluminum bikes ship in. So the Domane AL2 up to the Domane AL5, they all utilize the 100 series alpha aluminum. The fork, however, is going to be an OCLV carbon fiber, and that's true for all of the aluminum Domane bikes. They actually all have the exact same carbon fiber fork. Now, Trek doesn't specify what type of carbon fiber that is. On their other carbon fiber bikes, they usually specify it's like a 500 series or a 700 series or even 800 series. This one they don't specify. So my guess is it's probably a cheaper style carbon, but the idea with using carbon fiber here at the front is that it's going to dampen the road vibration at the front of the bike and also reduce the weight just a hair as well. So continuing with the frame then, at the top here we have a spot to mount a bento box, so we have 2 mounts for that, and then of course coming down here in the middle of the frame we have our standard water bottle cage mounts, and then underneath the frame we actually have 2 more mounts that you can use to actually mount something to the bottom of the down tube as well. So that's pretty cool, lots of mounts on this bike. And then if you look over in the chainstay of the bike, we actually have a spot for a duo trap sensor. So what that means is you can actually pull up the cap here, take a duo trap sensor, put it inside the chainstay, and that's going to measure your speed and your cadence. I don't ever use it personally, I just always use the Garmin at top, but it is there if you want it. Now you also have a spot to include a fender mount as well as a rack mount. So you could literally put a rack on here and use this as a commuter bike if you want to. So lots of really cool ways you can dress up this bike however you want to. Now, one thing I love about Trek bikes, which I think they lead the industry in, is their paint schemes. And the Domane is no exception. I think they really nail that really well. Up at the top here, we have the Domane logo, which is like this kind of 3D beveled logo. You can run your finger over it and it just feels nice to the touch. But otherwise, you have this big Trek logo here, which I really like how they put it on there. I think they make it look really nice and sleek, and it's a little bit shiny as well. Now, also with the frame, you'll notice that we have internal cable routing through the down tube. I really like how Trek does the internal cable routing. They're starting to do that more and more with the majority of their bikes, and I think it's a much needed move for the industry as a whole. And so I think it's just an awesome way to make the bike a little bit more aero and a little bit cleaner. Okay, so let's talk about the group set of the bike. So as I said, the Domane AL4 ships stock with the Shimano Tiagra group set. And I think that that is a perfectly good group set. I think it's the Goldilocks zone between all of the group sets in the Domane aluminum lineup. So the Tiagra we're running is a 4700 series Tiagra, which is the latest Tiagra. And it's pretty much going to be Tiagra throughout, except for the cassette in the back. So the cassette in the back is a Shimano HG500 cassette. It's not actually going to be Shimano Tiagra, and that's because the Tiagra group set doesn't actually include a cassette. So what Trek did is they took the HG500 cassette, which is a standard cassette that they usually ship with their Shimano GRX series, and they put it here as well. But otherwise, it's going to be Shimano Tiagra throughout. So the crankset, the derailleurs, the brake rotors, the brake calipers, and then the brifter levers up here at the top. So the crankset down here is going to be a 50-34, which is a compact style crankset. So you have 1 gear for your climbing and then 1 gear for your descending. And then the cassette in the back is going to be an 11-32 10-speed. So it's a perfectly good combination for pretty much all road riding conditions. I think the Shimano Tiagra shifting performance is really, really good. I think it's an excellent group set. There are some people that say that 105 is the group set of the people, and certainly it's held that name for a long time. But now that Shimano has moved the 105 to Di2 electronic, the price has skyrocketed. So I think personally Shimano Tiagra is now going to be anointed as the new group set of the people, and I think for good reason. And the brakes, which are also hydraulic disc brakes, work really, really well. And that's a really important safety feature, is to have good brakes. Okay, so now let's look at the top of the bike. So starting with the seat post, this is going to be your standard Bontrager Comp 6061 seat post. It's an aluminum seat post, and it's 27.2 millimeters in diameter. It's pretty standard, and so this would actually be a good place to do an upgrade in the future if you wanted to. You could easily replace this with any other seat post, such as, for example, a carbon fiber seat post, which would add a little more comfort and a little more compliance. But otherwise, the aluminum seat post that it ships with is totally fine. So perched on top of the seat post then is going to be the Bontrager P3 Verse Comp saddle. I think this is an excellent saddle. It's not necessarily a super high-end saddle, but I found this saddle to be extremely, extremely comfortable. Okay, so let's take a look at the cockpit now. So the stem is going to be your Bontrager Elite Blender stem. And what that means is there's going to be room at the front of the stem for you to mount any kind of accessory of your choice. So you could mount a bike computer, a light, a camera, anything you like. The stem has accommodation for all kinds of accessories. It is going to be aluminum, so in the future you could potentially upgrade this to a carbon fiber stem, but otherwise the aluminum stem here works perfectly fine. Okay, so moving to the handlebar then. The Domane AL4 ships with either the VRC or the VRS aluminum handlebar, depending on the size of bike you get. So if you get a size 44 through 52, you're going to get the VRS handlebar, which VRS stands for variable radius short. And so what that means is the reach of the bars is going to be 81 millimeter and the drop is going to be 118 millimeter. So it's a really good ratio to not interrupt your comfort, regardless of whether or not you switch from the hoods to the drops to the flats. The ratio between drop and reach is going to be really, really comfortable. Now, the sizes 54 through 61 are going to include the VRC handlebar, which stands for variable radius compact. And so that's going to give you 100 millimeters of reach and 124 millimeters of drop. But again, same thing, the ratio is going to be perfectly good to preserve your comfort regardless of which style of riding you're doing in any given moment between the flats, hoods, or drops. Basically, it's the same handlebar, it's just the dimensions are a little bit different depending on the size of bike you have. Now, the handlebar and stem and seat post and saddle are going to all be the exact same components that you get on the AL2, AL3, AL4, and the AL5, with the exception of the handlebar on the AL5 is actually going to be a Bontrager Elite Zone handlebar. And the idea behind that handlebar is it's supposed to sort of dampen some of the vibration. So that's one thing you get with the AL5 that you don't get on the rest of the AL aluminum bikes. But otherwise, they all ship with the same componentry on top of the bike, regardless of which model you get. Okay, so now let's look at the wheels and tires. So the wheels we're running are going to be the Bontrager Affinity TLR wheels, and like most of the lower end Trek bikes, they tend to outfit them with wheels that you really can't find a whole lot of information on. There's really not much to be said about these wheels other than I'm sure they're just your typical cheap wheels that Trek probably mass produces. I don't think that these are very good wheels. In fact, I think they're probably pretty bad wheels, but for this bike, they get the job done. They are aluminum, but other than getting the job done, there's really not much that you should expect from these wheels. The tires are going to be your Bontrager R1 hard case light tires. These are going to be 32 millimeter stock, but there's clearance for up to 35 millimeter if you want to add a little chunkier of a tire. I think these tires are fine for shipping stock with the bike, but they are pretty heavy. Each one weighs 428 grams, which is almost a pound. So one major upgrade you could make right away is to throw some Continental GP 5000 tires on there or any other high performance tire, and I think it would completely change the feel of this bike. I'm going to have a video coming out soon where I upgrade the heck out of this bike, including changing new tires. So if that's of interest to you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. But otherwise, these tires are perfectly fine for shipping stock with the bike, but I think an upgrade to a higher end tire might be something you want to do in the future. All right, now let's hop in the garage and find out the weight, and we'll come right back. All right, guys, actual weight, the 2022 Trek Domane AL4, 23.37 pounds. That's with nothing on there except for the water bottle cages. All right, guys, so now let's talk about the ride quality. So as I mentioned earlier, the Domane series bikes really have the ride quality nailed down. I don't know how Trek did it, but these are among the most comfortable bikes I have ever ridden. Now for me, what I like about this bike is it's not the kind of bike you have to get suited up in a jersey and bib shorts in order to enjoy the ride. This is a bike that you can just walk out the door in your average everyday clothes, just like this, and hop on the bike and go for a ride. And I really like that about it because it kind of puts you back into the mode of enjoying cycling. I do have an aero racing bike, and a lot of people make fun of me when I ride that bike because I always get suited up and I am just gunning it from A to B as fast as I can. And it's like the whole time I'm just staring at my Garmin. And a lot of people need to remind me like, hey, you should just enjoy the ride, enjoy scenery, enjoy nature, enjoy the outdoors. And the Domane series bikes, because this is such a comfortable bike, you can really do that without having to worry about getting suited up or prepared or do all this kind of, preparation before the ride. You can just walk out the door in your regular clothes, enjoy the rides, and have fun. The ride on the Domane is going to be a very smooth, comfortable, and stable kind of ride. It doesn't necessarily have that like surgical precision, precise handling that you may find on an aero race bike. Instead, it really just has a lot of confidence and smoothness and comfort, and it really glides over any kind of surface with confidence and ease. So whether you're on smooth tarmac or you're riding on bumpy trails or bumpy roads, the Domane handles it really, really well. And I really like that about it. You just feel very stable when you're mounted on top of this bike. And in my opinion, it really lives up to what it's trying to achieve, which is a comfortable, confident ride. Now, can it keep up with group rides? Well, the groups that I ride with tend to average about 20 miles per hour in some pretty hilly terrain. And I got a lot of flack about this in my other Domane AL5 review. But I personally think that at those kind of speeds in that kind of terrain, this bike is going to have a hard time keeping up. If you're riding with people who are on their aero race bikes or their super lightweight climbing bikes and they're going 20 miles per hour average speed over the course of 60 miles, I think that this bike is going to struggle with that. Of course, it all depends on your fitness. I think that this bike probably can keep up with group rides if you're riding in the realm of 15, 16, 17, maybe even 18 miles per hour on more flat terrain. Then I think this bike could probably keep up. But anything higher than those speeds and on terrain that's more intense, I think you're probably going to struggle. That's just my personal opinion. Don't flame me in the comments. It's just what I think. But as I said earlier, I do think that changing out those tires would completely change the performance of this bike. So if that's something you're curious for, as I said, make sure you subscribe and we'll find out what performance gains we can make on this bike. Otherwise, this is just an all-around really great adventure bike, and it could certainly be used on gravel trails as well. All right, guys, so then we come to the question, should you buy this bike? Well, you guys, I think that if you want a bike for comfort and you want to go long distances and you don't necessarily want to be super competitive, but you just want to enjoy the ride, I think the Domane AL4 is an awesome bike, and I think you should definitely buy it. I think among the aluminum Domane series road bikes, the AL4 sits in the Goldilocks zone between price and performance. So you could say, what about the AL5? With the AL5, you're getting the Shimano 105 Groupset, and as I mentioned before, you're getting the Bontrager Elite Zone handlebar, but I don't think you need either of those two things. The carbon fiber fork at the front already dampens a lot of the road vibrations. So having an additional Elite Zone Bontrager handlebar isn't going to make that much of a difference. So then the Shimano 105 Groupset, is that worth the upgrade? Well, in my opinion, definitely not. I think the Shimano Tiagra Shifting and braking performance is awesome. I just don't see any reason you need anything more than that. The important thing with the brakes is that they are hydraulic, just like they are with the 105. And that's going to mean that you get a lot of modulation, you get powerful, responsive brakes, and I think that's really important for safety. But you get that all with the AL4. So I don't see any reason to go with the AL5. Now you could say, okay, what about the AL3 or the AL2? Well, the reason I suggest the AL4 instead is because of the Groupset. The AL3 and the AL2 ship with Shimano Sora Groupset and Shimano Claris Groupset respectively. The shifting performance is okay on those, but moreover, it's the braking performance on the Sora and the Claris which I think is absolutely atrocious, and I cannot in good faith recommend those Groupsets simply on principle of safety, never mind performance. I think that if you're riding this bike on, say, like a bike trail, which a lot of people will be doing, if you have like a child run out in front of you, or a dog or a squirrel jump out in front of you or something, you need to be able to have fast braking. And the brakes on the Sora and the Claris are just awful. They're really, really bad. The Tiagra is worlds above it. And so, again, that's the reason why I think the Domane AL4 is really sitting perfectly well in the Goldilocks zone between price and performance. So if you want a comfortable bike that you can ride on gravel trails, on road trails, on smooth tarmac, on bumpy tarmac, but you're not necessarily looking to compete or go super, super fast, you just want to be able to enjoy the weather and enjoy the ride, well, I think the Domane AL4 is perfect for that, and I highly, highly recommend it. All right, guys, that's my review. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, drop a like and hit subscribe so you get more videos like this. I have more videos in the works. Otherwise, until next time, thank you so much for the support, and I'll see you later.